You ever make a trade so bad, so desperate, you can feel your ancestors turning in their graves? I did. My name's Silas McKenna, and I once traded my dead father's silver watch, the only thing I had left of him, for a donkey. Just a dusty, gray donkey with sad-looking eyes. At least that's what I thought I was buying. Turns out, the deal came with a little something extra. Something the auctioneer called bride papers. And that's how I, a broken, hungry prospector, ended up accidentally buying a wife. A woman who was traveling halfway across the country to marry a man who was already 3 weeks in the ground. But that's not the crazy part. Not even close. The crazy part is what she was running from. And the truth? The truth was buried deeper than any gold in these Wyoming mountains. And it was about to get us both killed. The sun beat down on the Wyoming trading post like a blacksmith's hammer. It was August of 1867, and the air was so thick with heat and dust you could chew on it. My stomach felt like a hollow drum, 3 days empty and complaining loud enough for the whole territory to hear. Up on the block was a donkey, a sturdy-looking fella, gray as a storm cloud, with these deep, intelligent brown eyes that seemed to see right through you. I needed an animal to work my father's claim up in the hills. Without one, I was as good as dead come winter. $37, boomed the auctioneer, Jeremiah Colt. Going once for the donkey and the bride papers. The words hit me like a stray bullet. Bride papers. I'd been so focused on the animal, on those strong legs and that calm demeanor, that the rest of his words just floated past me like smoke. But desperation makes you do stupid things. My hand shot up before my brain could stop it. My father's silver watch, heavy and cool in my pocket, was the only thing of value I owned. I pulled it out. It spun through the air, a silver star against the blue sky, and landed in Colt's meaty palm. Sold! His gavel crashed down. To the young man with the rifle. You got yourself a donkey and a mail order arrangement, son. Hope you know what you're doing. The crowd of weathered faces turned to look at me, some with pity, some with a kind of cruel amusement. Old Pete Jackson spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. Boy just bought himself a whole wagon load of trouble. He wasn't wrong. I stood there, frozen. My father's watch was gone. In its place, I owned a donkey and a marriage contract to a dead man. The donkey, for his part, lifted his head and looked right at me. It wasn't a dumb animal stare. It was a look that said, well, you've really done it now. His name's Tobias, a gentle voice said beside me. It was Pastor Williams, a kind-faced man who'd seen more than his share of desperate souls like me. He handed me a folded letter. She's been writing to Samuel Morrison for 3 months, planning to marry him. My gut clenched. But Morrison's dead. That he is, the pastor said grimly. Hart gave out. His relatives sold off everything, including the arrangement. The letter felt like a coiled snake in my hand. The handwriting was neat, careful, the words of a woman pinning all her hopes on a new life with a man who was now nothing but a name on a wooden cross. She doesn't know, I whispered. No, son, she doesn't. Far as Elena Vasquez knows, she's stepping off that train expecting a husband and a home. Instead, she was going to find me, a stranger who'd traded his last memory of his father for her dead fiancé's donkey. Tobias nudged my shoulder with his nose, a soft, insistent push, as if to say, standing here worrying won't fix it. I looked down at the letter, then at the sturdy donkey beside me, and then toward the mountains that held my father's claim, and my only chance at survival. When does the train get in? I asked, my voice hoarse. Tuesday morning, the pastor said. 5 days from now. 5 days. 5 days to figure out how to tell a woman her future was dead. 5 days to decide what kind of man I was. The kind who'd abandon a stranger at a train station, or the kind who'd look trouble square in the eye and see it through. Tobias let out a soft snort, as if he'd already made up his mind about what we were going to do. We walked away from the trading post, just me and my new partner, toward a future that was about to get a hell of a lot more complicated. And I had a strange feeling, a cold knot in my stomach, that a dead fiancé was going to be the least of our problems. The train whistle shrieked like a banshee, cutting through the crisp morning air. I stood on the platform at Cheyenne Station, twisting my hat in my hand so hard I was surprised it didn't fall apart. Tobias was hitched to a post nearby, watching the great iron locomotive chug to a stop with a calm curiosity that I definitely didn't share. Passengers spilled out, a river of tired, travel-worn faces. I scanned each one, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. What was I even looking for? A woman in mourning? A woman filled with hope? How do you spot a person whose life is about to be shattered? Then I saw her. She wore a simple blue dress, clean but mended in a dozen places. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, and she carried a single carpet bag that held, I guessed, everything she owned in the world. She wasn't pretty in the way you see in magazines, but she stood tall, with a quiet strength in her shoulders that told you she was no stranger to hardship. Her eyes, dark and sharp, swept the platform and landed on me. There was no hesitation. She walked straight toward me, her boots making a steady, determined sound on the wooden planks. Each step was a tick of a clock, counting down to the moment I had to destroy her world. "Samuel Morrison?" she asked. Her voice was steady with a soft Spanish accent hiding beneath the English. I swallowed. My throat felt like it was coated in sand. "Ma'am, my name is Silas McKenna. I I need to tell you something. Samuel Morrison, he passed away 3 weeks ago." I watched her face, bracing for the tears, the anger, the breakdown. Nothing. Her expression didn't change. Not a flicker of shock. Her eyes impossibly grew colder, more analytical. She glanced from me to Tobias, then back to me. It wasn't the look of a grieving fiancé. It was the look of a gambler assessing a new hand of cards. "He's dead," she stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am, his heart." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that sent a chill down my spine. "And the arrangement? The papers? I I bought them," I stammered, feeling like a fool. "At an auction. I was buying the donkey. It all came together." She walked over to Tobias, her movements fluid and graceful. She held out a hand, letting him sniff her fingers before she stroked his neck. The donkey, who was usually wary of strangers, leaned into her touch as if he'd known her his whole life. "You bought the donkey," she said, her back to me, "and you got me." She turned and her eyes pinned me to the spot. There was no sadness in them. There was something else, something hard and calculating. "That was a practical decision, Mr. McKenna. I respect that. This was not how I expected this to go, at all." "So," she said, her voice dropping to a businesslike tone, "what happens now? Do you have a place? A claim?" Yeah, a cabin up in the hills. My father's old mining claim." "Is it secure?" she asked. The question was odd. Not, "Is it nice?" or "Is it big enough?" "Is it secure?" "It's rough," I admitted. "Leaky roof. A long way from town." "I'm not afraid of rough," she said, her gaze sweeping over the town of Cheyenne, lingering on the shadows between the buildings. It was the look of a person checking for threats. "I need a place to stay. You need someone to cook, to mend, to help work the claim. We could be partners." Partners. The word sounded so simple, but coming from her, it felt like a contract with terms and conditions I couldn't see. "Until I can get back on my feet," she added, as if sensing my hesitation. I should have said no. I should have given her what little money I had and put her on the next train east. My gut was screaming at me that this woman was trouble, that her story had more holes in it than a sieve. But I looked at her, standing there with her one small bag and a spine made of steel, and I couldn't do it. And maybe, just maybe, I was intrigued. "All right," I said, surprising myself. "Partners." She gave me the first smile I'd seen from her. It didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good. Then let's not waste any more time. We should be on our way." As we loaded her bag onto Tobias, she paused and looked back at the station. "I came here expecting a marriage," she said quietly. "But perhaps a partnership is better. It's built on work, not promises." I thought about that as we rode out of town, Elena sitting behind me on Tobias, her hands resting lightly on my waist. She felt solid, real. But as we headed into the wilderness, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't just brought home a partner. I'd brought home a secret, and secrets out here in the wild have a way of getting you killed. The cabin was exactly as I described it. rough. 4 walls, a leaky roof, and a stone fireplace that coughed more smoke into the room than it sent up the chimney. To me, it was a wreck. To Elena, it was a puzzle to be solved. She moved through the small space with a strange intensity, not like a woman seeing her new, disappointing home, but like a general inspecting a fortress. She tested floorboards with her boot, ran a hand along the log walls, checking for gaps. She peered up the chimney with a critical eye. "The walls are solid," she announced, her voice echoing in the dusty air. "The foundation is good. It's high enough up the slope to see trouble coming." Again with that word, trouble. The first night, a storm rolled in. Rain hammered down, and the roof started leaking in 5 different places. I woke to the steady plink, plink, plink of water dripping into the pots she'd already set out. She was sitting by the fire, sharpening a knife with a whetstone. The blade whispered against the stone, a soft, dangerous sound in the dark. She wasn't just a farm girl from New Mexico. No farm girl I ever knew handled a blade like that, with a practiced, deadly efficiency. "Who taught you to do that?" I asked, my voice still thick with sleep. She didn't look up from her work. "My father," she said. "He believed a woman should know how to protect herself." The next morning, we rode into the nearest town, Millerville, for supplies. It wasn't much more than a wide spot in the road, but it had a general store. The storekeeper, a man named Henderson, eyed Elena with a blunt curiosity. "Don't see many ladies like you up in these parts," he said, his eyes lingering on her dark hair and Spanish features. Elena's smile was polite, but her eyes were ice. "I need canvas for patching, heavy thread, and a box of 44 caliber cartridges." Henderson's eyebrows shot up at the last part, but he got what she asked for. As we were loading the supplies onto Tobias, a man stepped out of the saloon across the street. He was tall and wiry, with a nasty-looking scar that cut through his left eyebrow. His eyes locked onto Elena, and he froze. A look of pure shock, followed by something that looked a lot like fear, flashed across his face. He ducked back into the saloon before I could get a better look. "You know him?" I asked Elena. She was staring at the saloon doors, her hand resting near the pistol tucked into her waistband. Her face was a mask, completely unreadable. "No," she said, her voice flat. "Never seen him before in my life." She was lying. I knew she was lying. The air crackled with it. On the ride back to the cabin, the silence between us was heavy. The easy rhythm we'd started to find was gone, replaced by suspicion. I kept thinking about the man's face, the shock, the fear. Who was she? Who was this woman who called herself Elena Vasquez? That night, after we'd patched the roof and sealed the gaps in the walls, we sat by the fire. The cabin felt warmer, more solid, but the space between us felt colder than ever. "Silas," she said suddenly, her voice soft, "tell me about the gold." I told her about my father, about his lifelong obsession with finding a rich vein he called the serpent's heart. I showed her his old hand-drawn maps, covered in cryptic notes and symbols. She took one of the maps, her fingers tracing the lines with a familiarity that made my skin prickle. "This symbol here," she said, pointing to a small circle with radiating lines near a drawing of a cave. "What did your father say it meant?" "He called it agua de oro," I said, "water of gold. He thought there was a connection, that an underground spring might lead to the main vein." Her eyes lit up with a sudden, fierce intensity. It wasn't the excitement of a prospector's partner. It was something else. Recognition. Before I could ask her what she was thinking, Tobias, who had been dozing outside, let out a sharp warning bray. We both froze. Then we heard it. The sound of hoofbeats, a lot of them, coming up the trail fast. Elena was on her feet in an instant, grabbing her rifle. The transformation was terrifying. The quiet, capable partner was gone. In her place was a warrior, her eyes scanning the darkness with a cold, professional calm. "How many?" she whispered, checking the load in her pistol. I peered through a crack in the wall. I could see the flicker of torches in the trees. 5, maybe 6 riders. And they weren't moving like lost travelers. They were moving like a hunting party. "They're not here for gold," Elena said, her voice grim. "They're here for me." And in that moment, I knew. I knew that the trouble she was always watching for had finally found us. The man from the saloon, he hadn't just been surprised to see her. He had gone to get his friends. Up, Elena hissed, already moving. To the high ground. We can't let them trap us in here. There was no time to argue. The riders were closing in, their torches painting frantic, dancing shadows on the cabin walls. We grabbed our rifles, ammunition, and a bag with what little food we had. Elena moved with a terrifying efficiency, like she'd done this a dozen times before. The back window, she ordered. Tobias will follow. We scrambled out into the cold night air. The donkey was already waiting, his ears swiveling, his dark eyes fixed on the approaching lights. He didn't seem scared, just alert. Ready. Elena pointed to a rocky outcrop that overlooked the cabin. There. We'll have a clear line of sight. We climbed, slipping and sliding on the loose shale, the thunder of hoofbeats growing louder behind us. We made it to the rocks just as the riders burst into the clearing. 6 of them. Hard-faced men with rifles held at the ready, and leading them was the man with the scar from the saloon. She's in there, he yelled, pointing at the cabin. Spread out. I want her alive. Alive. They wanted her alive. That was somehow more terrifying than if they'd just come to kill her. From our hiding spot, we watched them kick in the cabin door and storm inside. A moment later, they came out, angry and frustrated. She's gone, one of them shouted. Tracks lead up the slope. The man with the scar looked up, his eyes scanning the rocks, seeming to stare right at our hiding place. Elena, he bellowed, his voice echoing in the night. You can't run forever. Calderon wants to see you. Elena flinched at the name. It was a physical reaction, a tremor of pure fear that she quickly suppressed. Who is Calderon? I whispered, my rifle pressed tight against my shoulder. A very bad man, she breathed, her eyes never leaving the men below. A man I thought I'd left behind in New Mexico. The story about her family, the Apache raids, it was all unraveling, thread by thread. The tracks end here, a voice called from the bottom of our rock pile. The man with the scar smiled, a nasty, triumphant curl of his lips. Then flush her out. Burn it. My blood ran cold. They weren't talking about the cabin. They were talking about the forest, our cover. One of the men dismounted, a torch in his hand. He walked toward a patch of dry brush at the base of the rocks. In minutes, the whole mountainside would be an inferno. We'd be forced out into the open, right into their gun sights. We were trapped. We have to move, I said, my mind racing. Make a break for the caves, the ones on my father's map. They'll cut us down before we get 20 feet, Elena said, her voice strained. But she was looking at Tobias. The donkey was standing perfectly still, watching the man with the torch. His nostrils flared. And then he did something I've never seen an animal do before. He looked at Elena. Then he looked at a precariously balanced pile of boulders and loose scree just above the man with the torch. Then he looked back at Elena. It was a clear, unmistakable message. An idea. Elena saw it too. Her eyes widened. The rocks, she whispered. If we can start a slide. It was a crazy risk. We could bury ourselves along with them. But watching that torch get closer and closer to the brush, I knew it was the only chance we had. How? I asked. Elena didn't answer with words. She just started climbing, moving silently and swiftly up the rock face toward a large, unstable-looking boulder that was acting as a keystone for the whole pile. The man below us laughed, raising the torch. Last chance, Elena. I raised my rifle, aiming at the torch, but I knew I'd just give away our exact position. Suddenly, Elena let out a sharp, piercing whistle. It wasn't for me, it was for Tobias. The donkey responded instantly. He lowered his head and charged, not at the men, but at the base of the rock pile. He hit it with a force that was astonishing, a solid, living, battering ram. The ground shuddered. At the same time, Elena, high above, put her shoulder to the keystone boulder and pushed with all her might. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. The man with the torch touched it to the brush. A tiny flicker of orange flame sprang to life. Then with a deep, groaning sound, the mountain began to move. It started small, a few pebbles skittering down the slope. Then bigger rocks started to shift. The keystone boulder teetered, hung in the air for an eternity, and then plunged downward. It was an avalanche, a river of rock and earth thundering down the mountainside, directly toward the hunting party. Men screamed, horses panicked. The world became a deafening roar of grinding stone and splintering trees. The single flicker of flame was instantly snuffed out, buried under 100 tons of rock. When the dust began to settle, the clearing below was unrecognizable. The cabin was half crushed. The trail was gone. And of the 6 riders, there was no sign. They were either gone or buried. We were alive. We were safe. For now. I looked at Elena, her face covered in dust, her knuckles bleeding from scrabbling at the rock. Then I looked at Tobias, who was standing beside me, breathing hard but unharmed. He shook his head, sending dust flying, and looked at me with those calm, intelligent eyes as if to say, "See? Simple." My world had been turned completely upside down. The woman I thought was a simple mail-order bride was being hunted by killers. The donkey I'd bought by accident seemed to understand strategy better than most generals, and my father's quiet mining claim had just become a war zone. "We need to get off this mountain," Elena said, her voice trembling slightly, the adrenaline finally hitting her. "Before Calderon sends more men." She grabbed her bag and started moving toward the caves, not looking back at the destruction we'd caused. I stood there for a moment longer, the cold reality of our situation sinking in. We hadn't just won a fight. We had declared war on a man named Calderon, and I had a terrible feeling he wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat. This wasn't over. It had just begun. The entrance to the mine was a dark, gaping wound in the side of the mountain, just where my father's map had said it would be. It smelled of damp earth and long-forgotten secrets. As we slipped inside, the world went from the gray pre-dawn light to absolute, suffocating blackness. "I have a lamp," Elena whispered, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the confined space. A moment later, a match scraped, and the flickering flame of an oil lamp pushed back the darkness, revealing a narrow timber-framed tunnel that sloped steeply down into the earth. Tobias hesitated at the entrance, his ears twitching nervously. He didn't like this place. "Easy, boy," I murmured, stroking his neck. "We'll be all right." I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince him or myself. Elena took the lead, holding the lamp high. Her face was grim in the shifting light. The shadows danced around her, making her look like a ghost. "This tunnel should connect to a larger cave system," she said, her voice tight with tension. "If your father's map is accurate." The "if" hung in the air between us. "Who is he, Elena?" I asked, my voice a low rumble. "Calderon. And I want the real story this time. All of it." She stopped and turned to face me. The lamplight caught the tears welling in her eyes, making them glitter like dark gems. "My name isn't Elena Vasquez," she said softly. "It's Isabella Montoya." The name meant nothing to me, but it was clear that shedding the false one was a heavy weight off her shoulders. "My family. We weren't farmers," she continued, her voice breaking. "We worked for Victor Calderon. He runs an organization. Smuggling, land grabs, anything that makes a profit. My father was his bookkeeper. He knew everything. Every crime, every bribe, every murder." The pieces started to click into place. The way she handled herself, her watchfulness, her skill with a gun. She was raised in a world of violence and deception. "My father wanted out," she said. "He was going to go to the authorities. He made a copy of Calderon's ledgers, the real ones with all the proof. Calderon found out. The Apache raid. It wasn't Apaches. It was Calderon's men, sent to silence my family and get those ledgers back." She took a shaky breath. "I was the only one who escaped. I was in Santa Fe, making arrangements. My father had a plan for me to disappear. He arranged the marriage to Samuel Morrison, a good man who knew some of what was happening and wanted to help. He was supposed to get me out, give me a new name, a new life." "So the ledgers," I prompted. "I have them," she whispered, patting the small, unassuming carpet bag that Tobias was carrying. "They're the only reason I'm still alive. And they're the reason Calderon will never stop hunting me." A cold dread washed over me. I wasn't just helping a woman in trouble. I was harboring the single biggest threat to a powerful criminal empire. My little mining claim was ground zero. Suddenly, a sound from the mine entrance behind us made us both freeze. The scrape of a boot on rock. They'd found us. "Douse the lamp," I hissed. Elena pinched the wick, and the darkness slammed back in. Total and absolute. We stood there, hearts pounding in our chests, listening. Another scrape. Closer this time. Then a voice laced with frustration. "They came in here. I can smell the lamp smoke." It was the man with the scar. He'd survived the rock slide. My mind raced. The main tunnel was a death trap. If they came in with torches, they'd have us pinned. "The map," I whispered to Elena, my mouth close to her ear. "Is there another way?" I could feel her shake her head in the dark. "It just shows the main cave system. No other exits." We were cornered, trapped 100 feet underground with a killer at our backs. Then Tobias shifted beside me. He nudged my hand with his nose, then pushed his head past me, deeper into the tunnel. He let out a low, quiet puff of air, a sound of interest. He could smell something. Agua de oro, water of gold. My father's cryptic note. "What is it, boy?" I whispered. He took a hesitant step forward, then another. I grabbed his halter, trusting the donkey's instincts more than my own fear. Elena followed close behind, her hand gripping my shirt. We moved blindly, one shuffling step at a time, deeper into the mountain's gut. The air changed, it grew cooler, and I could feel a slight breeze on my face. A breeze. That meant there was another opening, somewhere. The sounds of our pursuers grew fainter behind us. Then I heard it, a faint, trickling sound. Water. We kept moving, and the sound grew louder, echoing off unseen walls. Tobias picked up the pace, his hooves sure-footed even in the pitch black. Finally, my outstretched hand touched not rock, but empty space. We had reached a larger cavern. The sound of water was close now, a steady gurgle and splash. Elena risked lighting the lamp again. The flame flared to life, revealing a breathtaking sight. We were in a massive underground grotto. A crystal-clear stream flowed through the center of the cavern, disappearing into a dark fissure on the far side. And the walls of the cave glittered and winked in the lamplight. They were laced with thick, brilliant veins of gold. It was real, my father's dream, the serpent's heart. More gold than I could ever imagine, a king's ransom running through the rock like solidified lightning. But that wasn't the most amazing part. Carved into the far wall, almost hidden by a waterfall cascading from the ceiling, was a small man-made doorway. A door that wasn't on any of my father's maps. And standing in that doorway, holding a lit lantern and a double-barreled shotgun, was a grizzled old man with a long white beard and eyes as sharp as a hawk's. "Took you long enough," the old man rasped, his voice like grinding stones. "I've been waiting for someone to find my back door for 20 years. He squinted at me, then at Elena, and then his eyes settled on Tobias. A slow grin spread across his face. "Well, I'll be," he cackled, "if it ain't my old friend Ulysses. I wondered what happened to you." Tobias, or Ulysses, let out a happy bray and trotted right over to the old man, nudging his hand like a long-lost dog. I just stood there, my mind completely blown. The donkey had a name, and an old friend, and he had just led us through a secret tunnel to a cavern of gold and a mysterious old man who was our only hope of getting out of this mountain alive. Things had just gone from complicated to completely insane. The old man's name was Jedediah Kane. He was, to put it mildly, a character. He claimed to have been living in these mountains for 30 years, a prospector who'd struck it rich, and then decided he preferred the company of rocks to people. "People are nothing but trouble," he grumbled, gesturing for us to come through the hidden doorway into his sanctuary. "Animals now. They make sense, especially this one." He gave Tobias, Ulysses, another affectionate pat. "Smartest damn donkey that ever lived. Found this cavern for me, he did. Sniffed out the freshwater spring from 5 miles away." His home was a series of interconnected caves, surprisingly cozy and well-lit with a clever system of lanterns. There was a fireplace vented through a natural fissure in the rock, a bed built into an alcove, and shelves overflowing with books, geological samples, and jars of preserved food. "So, he said, pouring us each a mug of something hot and vaguely smelling of pine needles. You've stirred up the hornet's nest, have you? I heard the ruckus. Rock slide, wasn't it? Nicely done. I looked at Elena. Isabella. Her face was a mixture of shock and wary relief. She hadn't let go of the carpet bag with the ledgers. We're being hunted, I said, deciding that being direct was the best approach. By a man named Calderon. Jedediah's face darkened at the name. He took a slow sip from his mug. Victor Calderon. That snake is still slithering around, is he? I knew his father. A bigger thief you'll never meet. They tried to run me off my claim years ago. Didn't work out so well for them. He patted the stock of his shotgun with a grim smile. They're in the mine, Isabella said, her voice urgent. They won't give up. No, they won't, Jedediah agreed. Calderon's like a rabid wolf. Once he's got the scent of blood, he'll follow it to the ends of the earth. He looked at the bag in her hands. I'm guessing you've got something he wants real bad. Isabella nodded. The old man stood up and walked over to a large, detailed map of the mountain range carved into a massive slab of rock. Well, the good news is, he'll never find this place. The mine you came through is a dead end. The main cavern collapsed years ago. You found the only other way in. But is there another way out? I asked. Jedediah's eyes twinkled. Boy, this whole mountain is my house. It's got more back doors than a whorehouse on Saturday night. He tapped a spot on the rock map. This underground river you followed, it flows out the other side of the mountain, comes out in a box canyon about 10 miles from here. Hard to get to, but impossible to be seen. It was a chance, a real chance to escape. But as we started to gather our things, a low rumbling sound echoed from deep within the mine. It wasn't the sound of men. It was deeper, more powerful. The ground beneath our feet trembled. Jedediah's face went pale. What in tarnation was that? Another rumble, louder this time. Dust sifted down from the ceiling of the cave. They've got dynamite, Isabella whispered, her face ashen. They're blasting their way through the collapse. The man with the scar. He must have known the mine was a dead end and come prepared. That's not good, Jedediah said, a master of understatement. This whole section of the mountain is unstable. If they set off a big enough charge, he didn't need to finish the sentence. They wouldn't just be opening a path. They could bring the whole mountain down on top of us. We had to move, now. The river is our only way, Jedediah said, grabbing a bundle of oilcloth and rope. But it's fast and it's cold as a witch's heart, and the passage gets narrow in places. We'll have to build a raft, and it won't be big enough for all of us and the donkey. My heart sank. Leave Tobias? After everything? He'd saved our lives twice. The donkey, as if sensing our dilemma, walked over to the underground river and peered into the dark, rushing water. He then looked back at us and let out a determined snort. Don't you worry about Ulysses, Jedediah said with a knowing smile. He's half fish, that one. He'll swim it. But we need to go before Calderon's boys turn this cavern into our tomb. A massive explosion, much closer this time, rocked the cave. A huge crack appeared in the ceiling, and rocks began to fall. The sound of shouting, triumphant voices echoed from the tunnel. They had broken through. We were out of time. We scrambled toward the river, dragging a makeshift raft of timbers and rope that Jedediah had already prepared. Isabella clutched her precious bag, her eyes wide with terror. I grabbed the lead rope for Tobias. Go! Jedediah yelled, shoving the raft into the churning water. I'll hold them off. Give you a head start. He stood at the entrance to his sanctuary, shotgun leveled, a defiant old mountain king protecting his castle. We're not leaving you, I shouted over the roar of the river and the approaching men. You don't have a choice, son, he roared back. Now get and take care of my donkey. Isabella and I tumbled onto the raft. I pulled Tobias into the water behind us. The current caught us immediately, pulling us into the darkness of the water-carved tunnel with terrifying speed. The last thing I saw was the flash of Jedediah's shotgun as he fired into the cavern, the boom echoing like a thunderclap. Then the darkness swallowed us whole. We were swept along in the frigid, rushing water, clinging to a few pieces of wood, with a king's ransom in gold above our heads and a pack of killers behind us. I had no idea where the river would take us, or if we'd even survive the journey. All I knew was that we had to make it. We had to get Isabella's evidence to the law. For Jedediah, for her family, and for any chance at a future that wasn't spent looking over our shoulders. The mountain had given me a treasure, a partner, and a purpose. Now it was trying to kill us. The journey through the underground river was a nightmare of icy water and absolute darkness. The raft bucked and spun in the current, slamming against unseen rock walls. I held on to Tobias's lead rope with a death grip, his powerful swimming the only thing keeping the raft from capsizing. Isabella was a silent, shivering shadow beside me, clutching the bag of ledgers to her chest as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the world. Hours bled into one another. We lost all track of time, our world reduced to the roar of the water and the biting cold that seeped into our bones. I thought about Jedediah, wondering if he'd survived, if his sacrifice had been enough. The thought of that brave old man facing down Calderon's thugs filled me with a hot, burning rage. Just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, that my fingers would freeze and lose their grip, I saw it. A faint, pale light ahead. An exit. The current seemed to speed up, funneling us toward the light. We burst out of the mountainside and into a hidden box canyon, just as Jedediah had described. A waterfall crashed down from the opening of the cave, masking it from view. We were surrounded by sheer, unclimbable rock walls. It was a perfect hideout. We dragged ourselves onto a rocky shore, shivering and exhausted, but alive. Tobias shook himself, spraying us with water, and immediately began searching for patches of grass to graze on. His resilience was a miracle. We were safe. For a moment. "They'll find this place eventually," Isabella said, her teeth chattering. "Calderon won't give up." "Then we don't wait for him to find us," I said, the rage from earlier solidifying into a hard, cold plan. "We take the fight to him." Isabella looked at me, her dark eyes searching my face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm done running," I declared. "You have the proof to destroy him. We're not going to hide in the mountains until he picks us off. We're going to Cheyenne. We're going to find the U.S. Marshals, and we are going to hand them Victor Calderon on a silver platter." It was a reckless, insane idea. We were two exhausted fugitives with a donkey. Calderon had an army of hired guns. But looking at the determination in Isabella's eyes, I knew it was the only way. We rested for a day, drying our clothes and recovering our strength. Then we found a treacherous game trail that led out of the canyon. The journey to Cheyenne took 2 more days, traveling by night and hiding by day, always watching our backs. Tobias, or Ulysses, was our silent, steady companion, carrying our meager supplies without complaint. Cheyenne was a shock after the silence of the mountains. The noise, the people, the feeling of being exposed on all sides was terrifying. We found the marshal's office, a squat, sturdy building on the edge of town. My heart was hammering against my ribs as we walked in. The marshal on duty was a big man with a tired face and suspicious eyes. "We need to report a crime," I said, my voice sounding weak even to my own ears. "What kind of crime?" the marshal asked, not looking up from his paperwork. "Murder," Isabella said, her voice clear and strong. "And I have proof." She placed the oilcloth-wrapped bundle of ledgers on his desk. The marshal looked at the package, then at her, then at me. He was about to say something, probably to tell us to get lost, when another man stepped out of a back room. It was Marshal Garrett, the man who had been hunting me for a bank robbery I didn't commit. His eyes widened in recognition. "McKenna?" he said, his hand instinctively going to his gun. "What in the hell are you doing here?" "We're here to help you," I said. "You've been chasing the wrong man. The man you should be looking for is named Victor Calderon." Garrett scoffed. "Calderon? The respected businessman? Don't waste my time." "Was the bank robber you were hunting supposed to have a scar on his left hand?" Isabella asked, her voice sharp. Garrett frowned. "Yes, from a knife fight in Denver." "And was the informant who told you about this robber a man with a scar over his eye?" she pressed. The marshal's expression changed. He was listening now. "Calderon's organization has been using you, Marshal," Isabella said, untying the bundle. "They've been feeding you false leads, using federal lawmen to chase their rivals and settle scores. That bank robbery, It never happened. It was a story invented to get Silas McKenna out of those mountains. Why? Garrett asked, his eyes now fixed on the ledgers she was revealing. Because he owned the claim next to one of Calderon's secret silver mines, Isabella explained, and because I was there. They wanted us both gone. She opened one of the ledgers. The pages were filled with my father-in-law's neat, precise handwriting, detailing dates, names, and payments. It was a damning, undeniable record of 2 decades of crime. Marshall Garrett stared at the pages, his face growing paler with every line he read. The truth was sinking in. He, a proud U.S. Marshal, had been a pawn in a criminal's game. "I'll be damned," he breathed. Suddenly, the front door of the office burst open. The man with the scar stood there, flanked by 2 of his thugs. His eyes landed on us, then on the open ledger on the marshal's desk. A look of pure panic flashed across his face. He drew his pistol. "The boss wants his property back," he snarled. But he was too late. Marshall Garrett was faster. His gun was out and firing before the man with the scar could even aim. The shot was deafening in the small office. The scar-faced man crumpled to the floor. His 2 thugs, seeing the tables had turned, tried to run. But the other marshal was already moving, and from the street, we heard shouts as more lawmen, alerted by the gunfire, converged on the scene. It was over. The fight was finally over. In the end, Isabella's ledgers brought down an empire. Marshall Garrett, fueled by a righteous fury at being manipulated, launched a full-scale investigation. Victor Calderon was arrested in his fancy office in Denver, sputtering in disbelief that his reign was over. His entire network of corrupt officials and hired guns crumbled like a house of cards. Isabella, given full immunity for her testimony, became the government's star witness. The girl who had been hunted and terrorized stood in court and with quiet dignity dismantled Calderon's world, one truth at a time. The name Isabella Montoya was finally cleared, her family's honor restored. And me? I was just Silas McKenna, the man who traded a watch for a donkey. The gold in that cavern, the serpent's heart, was legally my claim. Jedediah Kane, who had miraculously survived the shootout at his cave, signed papers making me his official partner. We were, on paper at least, 2 of the wealthiest men in the Wyoming territory. But wealth felt strange and distant. It wasn't the gold that mattered. What mattered was the quiet moment after the trial when Isabella found me on the steps of the courthouse. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "It's over," she said, a small, genuine smile on her face. "What will you do now?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "For the first time in my life, I'm free. I can go anywhere, be anyone." She looked at me, her dark eyes full of a question she didn't dare ask. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my father's silver watch. Marshall Garrett had recovered it from the auction house for me. It ticked steadily in my palm, a quiet, constant rhythm. "My father spent his whole life chasing a treasure," I said softly. "He thought it was gold, but he was wrong." I looked at her, at this brave, brilliant woman who had fought her way back from the ashes of her life. The real treasure is finding something, or someone, worth fighting for. I held out my hand. "You need a partner?" Her smile widened, and this time it reached her eyes, lighting them up from within. She took my hand. Her grip was firm and sure. "I do," she said. We walked away from the courthouse, leaving the shadows of Calderon in the past behind us. Waiting for us at the edge of town, hitched to a post and patiently chewing on a carrot, was a certain gray donkey. He looked up as we approached, and I could have sworn he winked at me. We had a future to build, a life to create, far away from the violence and deception that had brought us together. We didn't know where we were going, but it didn't matter, because we were going there together. Me, Isabella, and our old friend Ulysses. And that was a trade worth more than all the gold in the mountains. If you enjoyed this story, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, and let me know in the comments. What do you think was the biggest twist? The secret of Elena, or the truth about the donkey? Thanks for watching.